London police have held their press conference. We've learned quite a bit, and charges have been officially laid on 5 players pertaining to the 2018 World Junior Sexual Assault case. We learned a lot of details. We'll discuss what we've learned, what we still don't know, and how this is all likely going to play out coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, it was a big day in the NHL world today. We knew this day was coming. We knew that the London Police Department had planned a press conference for this afternoon, and we wondered what we may learn that we didn't already know, and so on from there. So we're going to talk today about what we learned from this press conference. There was also other news that came out through reporters like Robin Doolittle of the Globe and Mail and Rick Westhead of TSN, who have done tremendous work on this story over the past couple of years here about the court hearings that took place this morning as well. So what we do know, first up, they did confirm charges have been officially laid. Of course, we knew before that we had heard through sources that charges were being laid. Now we got this directly from the police that the charges that were discussed before are absolutely legit. Dylan Dubé charged with 1 count of sexual assault. Cal Foote charged with 1 count of sexual assault. Alex Formanton charged with 1 count of sexual assault. Carter Hart charged with 1 count of sexual assault. And Michael McLeod of the Devils, 2 counts of sexual assault. In relation to McLeod getting that second charge, there was some speculation on why and what that meant. We did get a little bit more clarity on that situation as well. Essentially, the second charge means that he's accused of aiding and abetting sexual assault. Now, they were asked and they did confirm this is 1 victim and 1 incident. So this is not anything separate at all. So, of course, in the original reports, we had heard that the alleged victim, referred to as EM, had connected and hooked up basically with 1 player consensually. They met at a bar in London, went back to the hotel. Things were consensual in the beginning, and then that player invited a bunch of his teammates up to the room, which is where the sexual assault cases took place. Now, that is kind of what people are assuming here, is the aiding and abetting, as he brought all the other players into this and basically allowed and set that assault situation to take place, at least what's alleged here. So that's why he's facing 2 charges. So I think it's pretty fair to say that I think he was referred to, I believe it was player 1 in the original reports, where all the names were redacted, that he was the player that she originally began, I guess, talking to or having consensual relations with at the bar that led to the hotel, and from there, everything else that reportedly transpired afterwards. Now, here's what else we've learned today. Not all this came from the press conference. Some of this came from reports from Rick Westhead and Robin Doolittle, as I mentioned as well. So the court hearings took place this morning. It was not very long, approximately 15 minutes. It was not clear if the players were actually present themselves. In the province of Ontario, lawyers are allowed to represent their clients directly at these kind of proceedings. They are not required to be there. They may not be actually physically seen in court until the trial actually begins. So I'm not clear if they were present or not, but they have been charged. They have been basically released on I guess you could say like a bail scenario. They were not forced to hand over their passports or anything of that nature. So they basically had conditions that they had to agree to be released, and that's taken place. Now, we also learned this morning that the Justice of the Peace ordered a publication ban on the identity of the victim, so we'll still not continue to know the name and identity of this lady. There's also the publication ban ordered on 2 witnesses. Now, we don't know anything about those people. We probably won't. I know I've seen some people speculating that they could be other players from this team. We know that there was reports that I think there was up to 8 players in the room where this allegedly took place. 5 have been charged. Are these other witnesses players that were there? We do not know, and we likely will not know. But keep in mind, there would likely have or could have been other witnesses that could be called. I mean, you got to remember, they were in a public place in a bar when everything started. So could they be friends of hers or other people they were hanging around that night, that very well could be the case as well. So we don't really know, and we will not know since the publication ban has been ordered. We know that the Crown Attorney, Heather Donkers, told the court that substantial paper and audio evidence collected by the police department, which is known as disclosure, would be sent to all lawyers today via courier. The next hearing date has been set for April the 30th. So I would suspect we probably won't hear or learn too much more before then, but you never know. We do have some pretty, top-notch investigative journalists working on this story for a long time here that have been able to get a lot of information. So we'll see if we do, but that's what we learned from the court hearings this morning. It doesn't really sound like there's much chance of anything being settled out of court or any guilty pleas entered. No pleas were entered at this point. That's not required at this stage of the proceedings here. But it sounds like the players, based on what they had comments through their lawyers before, that they are vowing to prove that they were innocent in all this based on what we know of the situation. I think this is really going to be a big battle of consent and whether or not what transpired was consensual or was not consensual. I know there's the audio recordings that players took of this lady who's the alleged victim. One, I think was, I believe, 6 seconds long, who said that she's okay with this, and another one that was a little bit longer, I think it was 12 or 13 seconds. I believe she's standing with a towel covering her or something to that effect. It says, "Are you recording me?" Says, "Oh, you guys are so paranoid. I'm so okay with this. I'm so sober right now, which is why I can't deal with this right now." And those comments and those audio video clips are definitely going to be, I think, a huge part of the case, and debate it back and forth what those comments really mean. I mean, you got to remember that the prosecution's likely going to argue here that she was fearing for her safety at this point and was going to say and do things to, protect herself and make sure things didn't get any worse than they already did. So we will see how things play out in court, but certainly I think that's fair to say is going to be, a big part of what we keep hearing about through the case. Now, with sexual assault, these charges, they do come in Canada with a maximum sentence of 10 years in prison, but it seems to be based on hearing comments from a lot of experienced attorneys who have dealt with these in the past, that it's quite common for first-time offenders to get on average of about 2 years. Now, we don't know how this is going to go, of course, and in the case of Michael McLeod, where he's facing 2 charges, if he is found guilty, he definitely would be looking at more. Now, of course, doesn't mean that he's going to end up let's for example, if the players were found guilty and he, like, on all charges, let's just say, for example, it doesn't necessarily mean that McLeod would do more jail time. It really boils down to how the judge orders the sentences to be served. For example, they could be done concurrently, which means they run at the same time, or they could be done consecutively, which means that one doesn't start until one is finished. Of course, the consecutive sentences, which would put them in the prison a lot longer. So if they do concurrent sentences, it may not make much of a difference. So we'll have to see. I mean, of course, they're not even tried yet. We don't know if they're going to be found guilty, innocent, or what have you. But if indeed that does come to be a guilty verdict in this case, then that's something that keep in mind that McLeod could end up doing more than the other people here involved. Trial is not likely to get started until late 2025 or early 2026. It's possible that other players connected to this team could be subpoenaed. And if they are subpoenaed, they will have to appear and answer the questions. This is not the United States of America. You cannot plead the Fifth Amendment, because that's the Fifth Amendment to the United States Constitution. This is not the United States. This is Canada. And in Canada, you are required to answer. So I will see if any of these players that may know stuff, that likely do know stuff, between the group chat and, obviously some of these other players may have been in the room and not participated so much in the crime, could be subpoenaed. So we'll have to see from that. Police were asked in their press conference numerous times, lots of questions that couldn't be answered. You got to remember that they're very limited on what they could say, so they don't compromise the the investigation, prosecution of these charges are being laid against. So they could give very few details in that sense. They were asked a lot about why the original investigation didn't produce charges. Did London police do wrong by the victim here? Why did it take 6 years to get to the point that charges are laid? And they really couldn't answer a lot of that. We do know that sometimes when cases are reviewed and investigated, but charges not laid, they're often, I believe almost always, I'm not quite sure the exact rule here because it's hard to understand from the press conference, but they have a review committee that reviews these cases. And this particular case was not reviewed afterwards, and they could not say why. Now, the current chief of police was not the chief of police at the time when this was first, when the complaint was first made it to police and the original investigation took place. So obviously he really couldn't comment too much on that, but he did say that he was happy that his predecessor in the but he did say that he's happy the former chief of police did reopen the investigation because they've reached the point that they have now when charges have been laid. Now, he also made a point, the police chief did, to offer his sincerest apologies to the victim and her family. They did outline that they are working hard at regaining the trust of the public and working on community relations is a top-notch thing. Obviously, he said that there really is no good reason why this should take so long, and it really shouldn't. Obviously, like I said, they could not get into the reasons why or why not things didn't happen sooner and why the original investigation didn't produce charges because of the ongoing legal process. So he did say on a lot of these questions that they're good questions, that people in the public deserve the answers, but it is not the time and the place to give those answers because of possibly compromising the ongoing investigation, prosecution, and that at some point he will gladly answer those questions when the time is appropriate. We also learned 100% that the victim in this case, the complainant, has cooperated with police pretty well from day one. So, there was some thought that maybe in the early stages of this investigation that there wasn't much cooperation, which is why it didn't lead to charges. But that doesn't seem to be the case at all. One thing that was kind of, I don't know, I didn't really agree with, and also not sure how tasteful it was. But at one point, the chief of police, you got to remember, I think the London police force felt like they were on the defensive. I think it's fair to say they felt like they were under attack for how this was handled. There's no way this should have taken 6 years. And certainly, like I said, I think they were really, the reporters were hammering the questions about why? Why did this take so long? And they reportedly asked very similar questions in slightly different ways that they couldn't answer. And at one point, he stopped a reporter from asking their question and went on a little bit of a rant of how the media also shares some responsibility, not necessarily in this case, but generally speaking, when it comes to sexual assault and the sexualization, he said, of young females, not just here in Canada, but globally, that the media bears some responsibility on how they're portrayed and how, magazine shoots and photo shoots and television and movies and music videos and all this stuff. And I'm like, I just don't know why he went out of his way to basically take a shot at the media in general with a room full of media. And the follow-up question that came next was, well, wouldn't you say that, 6 years of, waiting, this victim's been dealing with this for 6 years, isn't that just as much of a bigger problem to blame with the sexual assault here than the media? And he did agree and say that was, certainly, again, not something he wanted to see happen. Said it took way too long, but again, couldn't get into the reasons why. But I don't necessarily 100% disagree with his statement. I do think that sometimes the way things are portrayed in the world do play a role with how people feel and react, and it has impacts on culture for sure. I don't know. It just seemed a little tasteless to me at the time, and just poorly timed, not the place for it. I don't know. That's the only thing he really said that I thought was just kind of rubbed me the wrong way, so to speak. But obviously the police feel they have a strong case, clearly, or they wouldn't be pursuing these charges for sure. They also did acknowledge, because they were asked, what levels of participation in the investigation did they have from the rest of the team, and they would not say, but they just said that they had varying levels of participation from the other players on this, connected to this team, but wouldn't comment on specifics on who cooperated more or less or what have you. So that's pretty much everything we know. It was a very eventful day. The press conference was quite long. The police, they spoke from to the chief and the Detective Dan, to talk. So they had the two speakers, which I believe I would say probably like around 25 minutes thereabouts. And then, of course, there was probably another 25 minutes of questions. So it was not quite an hour, probably 45, 50 minutes. Some of the top reporters covering hockey or covering the story were present, did ask questions. Like I said, Rick Westhead, Robin Doolittle, Katie Strang, Ian Mendez, Chris Johnston, among others, were all there in London today to get the information and be able to ask questions to the police. So I guess in some ways it feels like we did learn a decent amount, but at the same time, there's still lots of unanswered questions. There's still a lot that we don't know, and that unknown is some pretty big details. Are all the other players completely off the hook of facing charges? We can't say that 100%. Could we see other players be subpoenaed? It certainly seems possible. This is going to be a long, drawn-out, high-profile case. And as much as there was also questions brought up about hockey culture and all that, and I'm like, well, the police chief did make a good statement on it. He said he's not a hockey player. He doesn't really know much about hockey. This is a sexual assault case, and his primary focus here, and if there's anything, as far as impact on the community and the country and just the world at large, is focusing on how we can make culture better to reduce these types of incidents. It's not necessarily a hockey problem. This is just a life world problem. And that is true. Can hockey culture change and get better? Absolutely can. I've been saying it for a long time. I do think some steps and some strides have been made to make it better, but it's far from perfect. It still has room to grow and get better for sure. There's still lots of things that can change. But this case is bigger than hockey. This is a culture issue just in general. And that was a good point, I thought, by the police chief. So we'll see. But one thing we do know, based not from this, but from other comments from Gary Bettman, it seems, and I know some other NHL reporters, as they were waiting for this to start today, were talking, it seems pretty unlikely, because now that these players have surrendered, okay, they've been charged and they've been released. Okay, so now they're released awaiting trial. They do have conditions that they had to agree to. For some of them that reside in the U.S. because they're on U.S. hockey teams, they're allowed to return to their countries. They do not have to send or rescind their passports. So they're fine to move around, do whatever they want until trial begins, essentially, or until they are required to appear. So I don't know that. There's probably very little chance, I would think, that we see players return to their clubs. They're all on expiring contracts. Strictly from a business perspective and NHL perspective, I don't know if we're going to get much more out of the NHL than we already did the other day. Gary Bettman already made comment that the NHL is basically going to let the legal process play out from here. The players are all on leave of absences, which is a paid leave. Their salaries for the year have mostly been paid anyway, so there won't be a huge impact, even if they did change their statuses in that regard. And they're all on expiring deals. So if they probably don't return to their teams this season, and then in the summer they're all expiring now. They're all also restricted free agents. So you got to remember they're not UFAs. So because of that, these teams would have to tender a qualifying offer to retain their rights. Fourth, a qualifying offer means you want to sign them. You're interested. So I don't know how this is going to go. Because these players, you could make the assumption that their hockey careers might be over. Coming back from this might be challenging and difficult. But there is a, innocent till proven guilty society that we live in. What if they are found not guilty? We don't know that. Can they come back from this? I'm sure they would like to try. And will these teams have any interest in bringing these players back if and when that were to happen? They would have to issue qualifying offers this summer to retain their rights. So I'm not sure how that's going to be handled. And we'll see if any further comments from the NHL come out here in the short term now that this is where we're at. So let me know your thoughts on today's events and what we've learned, and stay tuned. We'll cover this story here closely on the channel for further updates. Like I said, I'm not sure when we'll get more information, but we do have some great journalists that are investigating and been digging things up and getting us lots of info so far, and I'm sure they'll continue to do the great work that they've been doing as well. So again, if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any updates on this and all the other NHL news. Thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you next time.